The city sprawled beneath me, its lights twinkling like scattered stars. The view from my penthouse window was a reminder of everything I had built. The years of struggle, sacrifice, and grit. Now it was all here, in this single expansive view of a skyline I had fought for. I had earned this. But still, there was something unsettling about it. My father, sitting across the room, cleared his throat. He looked uneasy. His eyes wandered from the polished marble floors to the sleek lines of the furniture, the high-end appliances in the kitchen, and the art pieces on the walls. Every glance he made was filled with discomfort. I knew he didn't belong here. Didn't expect him to. It was never about making him feel small. It was about showing him something he never expected, that his daughter had arrived. We were supposed to be having dinner tonight, just a family gathering, a normal evening. Yet, I could feel the weight of the years between us, the unspoken judgments, the doubts, the disappointment. And there was something about tonight that made it all feel like it had to come to a head. The servers moved around us, placing custom menus printed with each guest's name in gold foil. There were envelopes next to each plate, sealed with a touch of wax, the contents a secret that would soon be revealed. My plan had been carefully thought out. I needed them to understand. I needed them to see everything, the years of silence, the rejection, and finally, the victory. Before we eat, I'd like you to open the envelope in front of you, I said, my voice calm but firm. They looked at me in confusion, exchanging glances. I could see the gears turning in their heads. My father, my mother, my brother. None of them were prepared for what was coming next. The room quieted as each of them slowly broke the seal. I watched their eyes shift from the letter in their hands to me and back again. Lisa was the first to react. She was always the practical one, the first to judge. Inside her envelope, she found a simple chart. On the left side was her salary, the number she'd been bragging about at every family event for years. And next to it, in a second column, was the number beside my passive income. It dwarfed her salary. At the bottom of the column was a polite note, "This is only from 2 of my 8 revenue streams." Her eyes widened as she looked up, her mouth moving, but no sound came out. Her fingers gripped the paper tightly, trembling. For a moment, she just stared at me, too stunned to speak. Next was Marcus, my older brother, the one who thought I was too idealistic, too naive, the one who had often reminded me of the harsh realities of business. Inside his envelope, he found an email from me sent years ago. I had reached out to his firm under a different name, with an investment proposal for Clarity Living, a startup that was nothing more than a dream at the time. His response had been dismissive, to say the least. "Home services aren't scalable, Mandy. Stick to something more realistic." Beneath the email, I had added a note. That $100,000 opportunity would be worth $17.4 million today. He froze, staring at the paper in disbelief. I could hear the sharp intake of breath as he realized what he'd done. "I didn't know it was you," he muttered. I met his gaze, unfazed. "I know. That's why I never took it personally." My mother was next. Her envelope, much thinner than the others, held something far more intimate, something that had haunted me for years. A list, a timeline really, detailing every time I had asked her and my father for support. Every time I had reached out for their approval, only to be met with rejection. The art project I was cleaning houses to fund, the small loan I had requested to start my first business. Each time, I was turned away. Attached to the list was a photo of my first office space. Tiny, cramped, self-funded, a reminder of where I had started. The place where it all began. I watched as my mother's face drained of color. Her eyes welled up, and she placed the paper on the table, unable to say a word. The room was thick with emotion. There was a silence, an understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement of everything we had all been through. And then, there was my father's envelope, the thickest of all. His face was hard to read. He opened it slowly, scanning the paper as though he were trying to decipher a code. Inside was a screenshot of the Forbes cover page. My name stood boldly at the top, listed among the most influential women of the year. He didn't say anything at first. He just stared. The weight of the years of rejection and skepticism from him sat between us, and yet, somehow, this moment felt different. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and quiet, but there was no mistaking the remorse behind it. "I was wrong," he said. "I thought I knew everything, but I didn't know my own daughter." His words hung in the air, unexpected and raw. I didn't need him to apologize. I had long since stopped seeking validation from him. But hearing those words, that was something I had never expected. Dinner passed without a word. No lectures, no boasts, just an atmosphere thick with reflection. After dessert, I stood in motion toward the large screen behind the table. "I want to show you something," I said, the words coming out more composed than I felt. The lights dimmed and the slideshow began. Images flashed across the screen. The first one was of me cleaning houses, exhausted, my face pale and weary. Then, a photo of me curled up on the floor of my tiny apartment, surrounded by books. I looked so young, too young to be taking on the world. My first office space, the first company retreat, the first media coverage, the first Forbes feature. With each image, I narrated my journey. The harsh words people had said, the doubts they had cast. I shared the emails, the phone calls, the late-night conversations where they had tried to convince me to give up. I was wasting my life. I should focus on something more practical. "You should have taken the safe route. You'll never make it. You should just get a job like everyone else." But I didn't stop. I kept going. And with every step forward, I built something that no one could take away from me. Finally, the slideshow ended. The last image was a photo of me and my grandmother. She had been the only one who ever believed in me. I looked at the picture for a moment, the words "she believed in me when no one else did" flashing across the screen. I turned back to them. "This wasn't about revenge," I said. "It was about truth. I'm not angry anymore. I don't need apologies. But I do need you to stop pretending I was ever less than." The room was still. The silence was deafening. But for the first time, I felt peace. The following week, the world was still buzzing. My inbox overflowed with partnership requests, podcast invitations, offers to write a memoir. Forbes had named me one of the most influential women of the year, and I was scheduled to speak at a global innovation summit. But the accolades didn't matter. The applause didn't matter. What haunted me was the stillness that had followed. The dinner. The quiet acceptance. The subtle acknowledgement that, for the first time, my family had seen me, not as their daughter, but as an equal. I sat at my desk, surrounded by the trappings of success. The brand partnerships, the team of professionals I had assembled. It was all there, but something still gnawed at me. It wasn't enough. That night, I sat on my terrace looking out at the glittering skyline. Luna, my old rescue dog, lay at my feet, her tail wagging lazily. I thought about the past, the years spent building, the nights I'd stayed awake wondering if it was all worth it. I thought about my grandmother, the only one who had truly believed in me. I pulled out the old flyer for Clarity Living, the first marketing material I had ever made. It was a crude design, hastily thrown together, but it had been my first step. I placed it gently on the table beside me and let out a slow breath. "We made it," I whispered, more to myself than to the world around me. The phone buzzed. A message from Dad. "Saw your TED Talk. You were incredible. Wish I'd listened to you sooner. Proud of you, Mandy." Truly, I stared at the text. It wasn't the words that caught me. It was the sincerity behind them. My father, the man who had once told me I would never amount to anything, was finally acknowledging what I had done. I felt a small sense of closure, but it wasn't enough. There was still something missing. I drove to the cemetery the next afternoon. I hadn't been there in years. The sun filtered through the trees as I stood before my grandmother's grave. I had brought fresh tulips just like she used to like. I placed them in the vase and stood there, lost in thought. I could hear my grandmother's voice in my head. "When the world doesn't believe in you, Believe in yourself. You have everything you need within you. And she was right. I had everything I needed. I didn't need the world's approval. I didn't need anyone's validation. I was already enough. That evening, I hosted a small dinner at the penthouse, a gathering of friends who had believed in me from the very beginning. We laughed, we drank, and we talked about the future. For the first time, I felt no pressure, no need to prove anything. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the family group chat. Mom, next Sunday is our turn. Family dinner at our place. You don't have to bring anything, just you. And if it's okay, maybe you could tell us more about what you're building. We want to learn. Finally, I smiled. There was no grand victory, no parade, just a quiet understanding, a slow, steady unraveling of the old story they had written about me. The next Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house. The house that had always felt too small for my dreams, too confined for my ambitions. But as I stepped inside, something felt different. The air was lighter, freer. Dinner was simple, no extravagant menu, just a home-cooked meal. But there was a shift. A quiet recognition that I wasn't the girl who had once been pushed aside. I was the woman who had built an empire, and for the first time my family truly saw me, not as their daughter, but as the person I had always been. Strong, determined, unstoppable. As the night drew to a close, my father placed his hand on my shoulder. "You've done something incredible, Mandy," he said, his voice full of pride. I wish I had seen it sooner. I smiled, looking around at the family who had once doubted me. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about embracing the fact that I had always been enough. And for the first time, I realized something profound. Success wasn't about proving the world wrong. It was about proving to yourself that you could rise, no matter the odds. As weeks passed, the landscape of my life began to shift in ways I hadn't anticipated. The recognition, the deals, and the public applause all became a blur, distant echoes of what had once felt like a far-off dream. Despite the professional success, there was something gnawing at me, a sense of disquiet that wouldn't let go. That sense of unrest didn't come from the world outside. It came from within. I started to question whether my achievements were truly mine. Was this journey about the accolades, the money, and the respect? Or was it about something deeper, something more meaningful? I sat at my desk late one evening, staring at the laptop screen. A new proposal was sitting in my inbox, another offer to speak at an international event. The crowd would be large, the expectations high. But my fingers hovered above the keyboard, uncertain. It was the same offer, the same script, and yet, the excitement wasn't there. Instead, a voice inside my head urged me to stop, to pause. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and leaned back in my chair. The room was silent, but the world felt far too loud. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the contacts. I hesitated, then pressed the button to call my father. "Hey, it's me," I said when he picked up. "Can we talk?" He sounded surprised but pleased. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "Do you ever wonder if we're missing something?" I asked, the question hanging between us. There was a long pause on the other end. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. All of this, the business, the success. It feels like I'm just checking boxes, doing what's expected of me. But I don't know if it's enough. I thought it would feel different when I got here. I could almost hear him nodding on the other end. "I get it. I've been there too. Success doesn't always feel like we think it will." It was strange, hearing those words from him. For years, I had sought his approval, always wanting him to be proud of me. And now, here he was. Just another person trying to make sense of his own journey. "I don't know if I can explain it," I continued, my voice trembling slightly. "But I need to figure out what's next. What really matters. Maybe I've been chasing the wrong things." He paused, and for the first time, there was a gentleness in his tone that I hadn't heard before. "Mandy, I think it's time for you to ask yourself the same question I had to ask myself years ago. What do you want to build? Not what people expect, Not what you think you should want, but what you actually want. The rest is just noise. Conversation lingered in my mind long after we hung up. I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just shifted. I had spent so many years chasing a version of success that didn't belong to me. It wasn't about the applause. It was about finding meaning in my work, something that connected to who I truly was, not the image I had crafted for others. The next morning, I woke up early, the sun barely rising, casting a golden glow over the city. I had a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of the uncertainty. I drove to the park where I used to take walks when I was younger. The familiar trees, the stillness of the early morning air, it all felt like a return to myself. As I walked along the path, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. The world felt right again. I stopped at a bench and sat, gazing out at the horizon. I thought about my grandmother again, the woman who had always believed in me. I could hear her voice in my head. Don't chase after what others want. Find your own path and walk it with purpose. I had always thought that success was a destination, a point to reach. But now I realized that success wasn't about the accolades or the recognition. It was about the journey, the growth, the impact I could have on the lives of others. It was about being true to myself, no matter where the road led. As I sat there, the quiet of the morning deepened my resolve. I needed to change the narrative, not just for myself, but for others as well. I was no longer interested in building an empire for the sake of building it. What mattered now was creating something that aligned with my values and made a difference in the world. It was time for a new beginning. In the days that followed, I made some difficult decisions. I began to scale back on the offers that came my way, opting to focus on projects that resonated deeply with me. I turned down the speaking engagements and the corporate partnerships that felt more about prestige than purpose. Instead, I started working on initiatives that aligned with my vision for creating positive change. I began mentoring young entrepreneurs who shared my values and teaching them how to build businesses rooted in integrity, compassion, and sustainability. I invested in causes that I believed would make a real impact on the world, especially those focused on mental health and supporting underprivileged communities. For the first time, I felt like I was truly contributing, not just to my own success, but to something much bigger. The shift wasn't easy. I faced pushback from the people around me, those who couldn't understand why I was stepping away from the spotlight. They didn't see the vision, and that's when I realized something vital. Not everyone would understand. And that was okay. This new path wasn't about appeasing others or fitting into their idea of what success looked like. It was about carving out my own definition. I was no longer chasing the recognition. I was chasing fulfillment. Months passed, and my life began to look very different. The new ventures I was pursuing brought a sense of joy and fulfillment that I hadn't known before. My days were filled with meaningful work, and I no longer felt the pressure to prove myself to anyone. My family noticed the change too. They could see that I was happier, more at peace with myself. Even my father, who had once doubted me, began to understand the journey I had taken. He never fully grasped the intricacies of my work, but he saw the difference it made in me. One evening, after a long day, I sat at my desk again, looking out at the city. The skyline had never looked more beautiful to me, but this time, I wasn't seeing it as a symbol of my success. I was seeing it as a symbol of my journey. I picked up my phone, opened the text message thread with my family, and typed, "It's been a long road, but I'm finally on the right one." I hit send and leaned back in my chair, a contented smile on my face. It wasn't about the destination. It was about the journey. And for the first time, I knew that the real work had just begun. And as I sat there, feeling the weight of my journey behind me, I realized something essential. The real success wasn't in proving others wrong. It was in realizing that I could define my own worth, and that in itself was the greatest victory of all.